Lieutenant Jack, Reaper, Carter woke up with a pounding headache, a bruised rib, and the distinct sensation that someone had dropped him onto a slab of metal like an unwanted piece of luggage. As he blinked against the sterile glow of artificial lights, the memories rushed back. Ambush, explosion. A lot of shouting in a language that sounded like a blender trying to recite Shakespeare. He exhaled sharply. Captured. The room was small but designed to make him feel even smaller. Sleek walls curved into a seamless ceiling, bathed in a cold blue hue. The only furniture was the slab he lay on, which he strongly suspected was also an interrogation table. His hands were shackled in front of him, the cuffs made from some glossy alien alloy that didn't even have the courtesy to rattle when he moved. Across from him stood 3 figures. They were tall. Too tall, really, for Jack's liking, with elongated faces and eyes that glowed like embers in deep sockets. Their skin shimmered like oil on water, shifting between purples and deep blues as they moved. They wore ceremonial-looking armor, all sharp edges and impractically large shoulder plates, as if they had mistaken a cosplay convention for a battlefield. One of them, who Jack mentally labeled Captain Shoulder Pads, stepped forward and cleared his throat. It was a raspy, layered sound, like a snake gargling gravel. "You are a prisoner of the Galactic Council, human." Jack stretched his neck with a deliberate slowness, rolling his shoulders despite the cuffs. "Well, that explains the hospitality. You guys always greet guests by knocking them unconscious, or is that just a special treatment thing?" The second alien, slightly shorter and wearing a sash that probably meant something important, bared a row of needle-thin teeth. "You are in no position to joke." Jack lifted his bound hands, tilting his head. "Oh, I don't know. I think I'm in the perfect position to joke. You guys are the ones who have to explain how you let a single human take out half your strike team before getting caught." He grinned. "Must be embarrassing." A visible twitch ran through the shorter alien's jaw. Captain Shoulder Pads raised a clawed hand. "You are a combatant of the Terran military, designated Navy SEAL. Your ship was destroyed, and you are the sole survivor." "Lucky me." The captain ignored him. "You will provide intelligence on human military movements, technology, and strategic command. Cooperation will ensure leniency." Jack arched a brow. "And if I say no?" The third alien, who had been silent until now, stepped forward and placed a strange, hovering orb in front of Jack's face. It pulsed with a faint, sickly green glow. "This is a neural extraction device," the alien announced with what Jack assumed was meant to be an intimidating tone. "It can pull information directly from your mind, rendering deception impossible." Jack stared at it, then at them, then back at the orb, with a deep, shuddering breath. He threw his head back and let out an agonized scream. The aliens jolted in surprise. Jack convulsed dramatically, his muscles tensing as if the device had already invaded his thoughts. "No," he groaned. "My secrets. My deeply classified knowledge. It's—" He stopped mid-sentence and blinked. "Wait, is it on?" The shorter alien tilted his head. "Not yet." Jack let his body go slack. "Oh, okay, cool. Thought I was jumping the gun there." A beat of silence. Captain Shoulder Pads rubbed his temples. The shorter alien made a wheezing sound, which Jack hoped was frustration and not their version of laughter. "This is a waste of time," the short one hissed. "Humans are reckless. Foolish creatures who lack the discipline for true warfare." Jack smirked. Says the guy wearing a cape indoors. The captain silenced his subordinate with a glare before turning back to Jack. "You will remain here while we determine the appropriate course of action. Do not test our patience." With that, the 3 aliens turned and exited, the door sealing behind them with a hiss. Jack exhaled and glanced at the floating orb, which had dimmed now that it wasn't being used as a prop in an intimidation routine. "Well," he muttered to himself, "they seem fun." Then, with practiced ease, he reached into the seam of his sleeve and pulled out a tiny, nearly invisible strip of metal, a piece of emergency lockpick wire he always kept hidden. The cuffs might have been made of some fancy alien alloy, but locks were still locks. As he worked, he listened to the muffled voices beyond the door. "Are we sure he's just a standard soldier?" came one voice. "He fought like a demon," another muttered. "And he joked under interrogation," said the shorter one, still sounding shaken. "Who does that?" Then came the sound of a console beeping. A long pause. "Oh," one of them whispered. "What?" "His call sign, Reaper, silence." Jack smirked as the cuffs popped open. The last thing he heard before the room's alarms blared to life was an alien voice whispering, barely audible through the wall. "We made a mistake." The interrogation chamber remained bathed in sterile blue light, but the mood outside had shifted dramatically. Where before the Galactic Council officers had been composed, smug, even, now a palpable unease crackled through the air like a live wire. Commander Zalvor, the highest-ranking officer present, stared at the glowing screen in front of him, his elongated fingers twitching slightly as he scrolled through the human's military records. The data flickered with intermittent redactions, entire sections blacked out by what he could only assume were human intelligence protocols. But what was visible was enough to send an icy coil of dread through his secondary heart. The human's designation, Lieutenant Jack Carter. Callsign Reaper. Zalvor didn't recognize many human military ranks, but he did recognize a name that had circulated in hushed council meetings, in debriefings from terrified scouts who had witnessed the human war machine firsthand. Reaper. The title alone conjured horrific imagery. Battlefields littered with enemy dead, entire strike teams erased in a single night, the inexplicable way human forces seemed to thrive in impossible conditions. But it was the anecdotes that truly unnerved him. He scrolled further. A junior officer read aloud from the file, voice wavering. Engaged enemy forces in dense jungle warfare. Survived 3 days without resupply, subsisting on local flora and predators he personally hunted. Zalvor's mandibles clicked together in distress. He ate his enemies. The junior officer swallowed. Unclear, sir, but highly probable. Another alien, a wiry, neurotic-looking Ronaxi, wrung his clawed hands. "We captured a human apex predator." Zalvor's eyes flicked toward the interrogation chamber's security feed. The human, Jack Carter, was still sitting on the interrogation table, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been moments ago. He looked relaxed, not defeated, not broken, just waiting, like a hunter watching his prey hesitate. Zalvor turned back to the records. Black Ops deployment, classified. Infiltration missions, redacted. Survivor of the Omega-9 incident, status, undisclosed. Personal combat record. 43 confirmed enemy eliminations in single engagement. The room was silent. Then another officer, a stout, rule-obsessed Gorlak, frowned at a particular entry. He squinted and read aloud, almost disbelieving. Once incapacitated an entire enemy encampment with, wait, 1 spoon? The Rilnaxi gasped. Was it sharpened? Poisoned? The Gorlak scrolled further, then blanched. No, it was just a spoon. Silence. Zalvor exhaled slowly. Release him. The Gorlak balked. But, sir, release him. The Rilnaxi officer, still trembling, nodded so violently his head crest wobbled. He scrambled toward the control console. The door to the chamber hissed open. Jack looked up, mildly amused. Finally, thought you guys forgot about me. Zalvor stepped inside, posture tense but measured. Lieutenant Carter. Jack stretched leisurely. See, now you're using my name. That's progress. Zalvor ignored the jab. We recognize that there has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. Jack quirked a brow. Do you? The commander inhaled deeply. He loathed negotiations. He preferred war when it was predictable. Strategies, deployments, victories won through superior numbers and tactics. But this wasn't a battle. This was damage control. Yes, Zalvor said carefully. You are not a standard prisoner. We acknowledge that detaining you was an error in judgment. Jack smirked. Let me guess. You ran my file. The Rilnaxi officer nearly squeaked. We may have. Jack crossed his arms. And the entire room hesitated. Jack sighed. You really want to make me say it? More hesitation. He leaned forward, grinning. You're scared? No one spoke. No one needed to. Jack let the moment stretch just long enough for them to sweat. Then he clapped his hands together. All right, fine. Let's talk exit strategies. The Gorlak officer shuffled forward cautiously. You won't, seek retribution? Jack considered this, stroking his chin dramatically. I dunno. You did knock me out, kidnap me, and try to brain scramble me with a glorified lava lamp. The Rilnaxi officer made a panic sound. It wasn't activated yet. Doesn't sound like an apology, Jack mused. Zalvor clenched his jaw. We will compensate you. Just leave. Jack gave a mock gasp. Wow. Kicking me out already? At least buy me dinner first. Zalvor's patience was wearing thin. Your ship is gone. We will provide you with one of ours. A small one. Unarmed. Jack stood, rolling his shoulders. See, now that sounds like an apology. He strolled toward the exit, pausing just as he reached the doorway. He turned, flashing a grin at the entire, deeply uncomfortable room. You guys are lucky I was in a good mood today. And with that, Reaper walked free. Jack Carter strolled through the sterile, curving corridors of the Galactic Council's flagship Vorkesh, his hands stuffed casually into the pockets of his tattered combat pants. His captors, well, former captors, were doing their best to avoid eye contact, stepping aside with nervous glances as he passed. He wasn't sure if they thought he was dangerous because of his actual combat record, or if they'd heard the rumor that he'd once defeated an entire insurgent cell with nothing but a mess hall spoon. Either way, it worked in his favor. At his side, Commander Zalvor walked stiffly, clearly regretting every decision that had led to this moment. The alien's elongated face was locked in a tight, unreadable expression, his sharp mandibles clicking occasionally. Whether from frustration or stress, Jack couldn't tell. I'm assuming this compensation ship of yours isn't a one-way ticket into a black hole. Jack asked casually. Zalvor exhaled slowly, as if forcing patience. It is a fully functional, standard-issue diplomatic shuttle, equipped with autopilot, emergency rations, and... Jack held up a hand. Yeah, but can it actually fly, or is this one of those situations where I board and then boom, self-destruct? Zalvor stiffened, looking genuinely offended. The Galactic Council does not employ such deception. Jack raised a skeptical brow. Uh-huh, sure. You just kidnapped me and threatened to scramble my brain, but a little sabotage? That's where you draw the line. The commander's eye twitched, but he said nothing. Jack smirked. Relax, big guy. I believe you. Mostly. They reached the docking bay, where a sleek, silver-gray shuttle awaited. It was small, too small for comfort, but it looked intact. A group of engineers stood near the ramp, eyeing Jack like he was a particularly unpredictable predator. One of them held out a data pad, trembling slightly. Jack took it, scrolling through the pre-programmed flight path. He wasn't surprised to see it was locked to a single destination, neutral space, far from human-controlled territories. The Council clearly didn't want him anywhere near his own people. He hummed in thought, rubbing his jaw. Okay, this'll work. Mostly. Zalvor narrowed his glowing eyes. What do you mean, mostly? Jack grinned. I mean, you might think this is a nice, neat handoff, but I've got a tiny problem. He turned the data pad toward Zalvor and tapped the flight destination. This gets me out of your hair, but it leaves me floating in neutral space alone with no backup. That's a pretty lousy deal for me. Zalvor's mandibles twitched. It is preferable to imprisonment. Jack tilted his head. Debatable. But here's the thing. What if you help me get back to human space? The commander's eye twitched harder. We are helping. We are not executing extractions for human operatives. Jack sighed dramatically. Oh, come on. I'm just one guy. What's the worst that could happen? Zalvor muttered something in his native tongue that Jack was fairly certain translated to this human is going to be the death of me. Before the alien could refuse again, Jack changed tactics. All right, let's make this easy. Say I do take your little shuttle and leave peacefully. What stops me from being picked up by pirates? Or, worse, some rogue council fleet that doesn't know you let me go. Zalvor hesitated. He knew Jack had a point. Jack leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. And let's be honest here, if I do get captured again, you know the first thing I'm telling them? Zalvor exhaled sharply. Let me guess. That we let you go. Jack's grin widened. Bingo. And then suddenly you're looking real bad in front of your superiors. The commander's jaw clenched. The political backlash would be unpleasant. A long silence stretched between them. Then, with great reluctance, Zalvor muttered, What do you propose? Jack clapped his hands together. Glad you asked. Step 1. Acquire navigation access. Jack needed to adjust the shuttle's locked flight path to take him closer to human-controlled space. But the console was locked down under Galactic Council security protocols. Lucky for you, Jack said, slinging an arm around a nervous-looking engineer. I happen to be great with computers. The engineer yelped. That's illegal. Jack shrugged. So's kidnapping. Look where we are now. The engineer whimpered but complied. A few keystrokes later, Jack had partial control over navigation. Not full control. He wasn't dumb enough to think they'd let him waltz off with an unrestricted ship, but enough to set new waypoints. Step 2. Avoid detection. The Vorkesh was a high-security vessel, meaning Jack's departure needed to be low-key. Can you clear me for an authorized departure? He asked Zalvor. The commander sighed. I will arrange a clearance code, if only to make you leave faster. Jack gave him finger guns. See? Teamwork. Step 3. Don't die. Jack boarded the shuttle, ran a final check, and settled into the pilot's seat. As the engines hummed to life, Zalvor and his officers watched from a safe distance, their expressions ranging from relief to sheer exhaustion. Just before the ramp closed, Jack gave them a lazy salute. Pleasure doing business, folks. Try not to kidnap any more humans. We tend to hold grudges. The Ronaxi officer muttered. Never again. Jack grinned. Then, with a smooth press of the controls, he launched into space, leaving behind a very confused, very grateful Galactic Council. Final thought. As he accelerated away, Jack leaned back, feet up on the console. He chuckled to himself. They actually let him go. Jack Carter leaned back in the pilot's seat, boots propped up on the control console, as the shuttle cruised through the void. The Galactic Council had, against all odds, actually let him go. He wasn't about to question his good fortune, at least, not out loud. Still, something gnawed at him. He tapped at the console, cycling through sensor readings. The shuttle was small, fast, but lightly armed, designed for diplomatic transport, not military engagements, which was fine, considering he was flying solo. But something didn't sit right. That's when the proximity alarm screamed. Jack's boots hit the floor as he scanned the readings. A council enforcement vessel had just appeared on his tail, closing fast. He exhaled sharply, called it the betrayal, sort of. A transmission crackled to life, and an all-too-familiar voice came through. Lieutenant Carter. Commander Zalvor's tone was tight, restrained. I strongly advise you to power down your engines. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. Really, Zal? We were having such a nice moment back there. This is not personal, Zalvor insisted. I am under new orders. Jack smirked. Let me guess. Some higher-up panicked the second they realized you let me walk. And now you have to fix your mistake before it gets messy? Zalvor's silence told him everything. Jack exhaled. All right, fine. What's the plan? You disable my ship, drag me back, and hope I don't hold a grudge. A pause. Then, begrudgingly, I was hoping you would surrender peacefully. Jack grinned. Oh, buddy, that was never going to happen. He slammed the throttle forward. The shuttle lurched, engines roaring as he veered hard to starboard. Zalvor's ship reacted instantly, snapping into pursuit. The chase begins. Jack's shuttle was fast, but the Vorkesh-class enforcement vessel had superior engines, shields, and, oh yeah, actual weapons. Within seconds, warning shots zipped past, sizzling streaks of blue plasma lighting up the cockpit. Jack whooped, grinning. That all you got? He taunted, rolling the ship into a dizzying corkscrew. Inside the enforcement vessel, Zalvor's mandibles clicked in frustration. He is enjoying this, he muttered. His tactical officer, a frazzled-looking Rilnaxi, let out a nervous chitter. Should we increase firepower? Zalvor's eyes narrowed. No, we cannot risk damaging his ship beyond recovery. Aim for engines only. Jack, meanwhile, was weaving through an asteroid field, juking and rolling between tumbling space rocks. The enforcement vessel followed with precision, but Jack had an advantage. They were trying not to kill him. On the other hand, he thought smugly and willing to risk everything just to be a pain in their ass. He spun the shuttle into a sharp dive, skimming along the surface of a massive asteroid. The enforcement vessel followed, matching his trajectory. Jack smirked. All right, Zal. Let's see if your boys can keep up. The trap. Jack flicked a switch, killing his ship's engines entirely. The sudden dead stop caused the enforcement vessel to overcorrect, swinging wide. Oh, come on, Zalvor growled, watching Jack's shuttle drop out of their sights. Jack reignited his engines, flipping a hard U-turn. Now he was behind them. He opened a comm channel. Hey, Zal, ever heard of a crazy Ivan? Zalvor frowned. A what? Jack's shuttle surged forward. He flew dangerously close, buzzing the enforcement vessel's bridge, then darted underneath their hull. The alien crew yelled in alarm. Zalvor gripped his seat's armrests. Someone stop him. Jack cackled as he juked left, then right, avoiding their targeting systems entirely. The Rilnaxi officer was practically hyperventilating. H-human flight patterns are unpredictable. He's doing it on purpose. Jack's voice crackled over the comms. Ding, ding, ding. Give the man a prize. The final gambit. Jack checked his sensors. Human space was still a few minutes away. If he could just hold out a little longer. That's when a second alarm blared. His stomach dropped. A pirate warship had just entered the system. Jack muttered a curse. Oh, for foo. The pirate captain's voice broke through the comms, rough and smug. Well, what do we have here? A juicy little Galactic council ship chasing a lone human? You boys look busy. Jack sighed. I swear, my luck is something else today. Zalvor, who had also received the transmission, clicked his mandibles. This is unacceptable. The pirate continued, amused. Tell you what, I'll make this easy. Drop your shields, power down, and we'll be nice. Jack leaned back, grinning. Oh, Zal, this just keeps getting worse for you. Huh? The commander exhaled sharply. We should be on the same side. Jack smirked. Then prove it. Zalvor hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then he turned to his tactical officer. Weapons free. Target the pirate vessel. Jack's grin widened. Now that's the spirit. Chaos ensues. The pirate warship fired first. Plasma rounds streaked toward both ships. Jack threw his shuttle into a breakneck dive, narrowly avoiding the barrage. Zalvor's ship retaliated with a blistering counterattack, forcing the pirates into evasive maneuvers. Jack opened a channel to the enforcement vessel. Hey, Zal, call it a truce? Zalvor's voice was tight. You are infuriating. Jack grinned. And yet, here we are. With Zalvor's ship drawing fire, Jack punched his engines to max. The pirate vessel tried to reacquire him, but he was already accelerating toward human space. Zalvor's crew watched in disbelief as Jack's shuttle disappeared into the distance. The Rilnaxi officer gulped. Should we pursue? Zalvor leaned back, rubbing his temples. No. The commander exhaled. He's not worth the headache. As Jack's shuttle finally crossed into human space, he leaned back in his seat, grinning ear to ear. Not bad, he muttered to himself. Not bad at all. Jack Carter stepped onto the deck of the USS Valiant, stretching as if he'd just come back from a casual jog instead of escaping an interstellar manhunt. Around him, a mix of officers and Marines stared, wide-eyed. He gave them a lazy salute. Miss me, Commander Briggs, a grizzled veteran with the perpetual look of someone who hadn't had a full night's sleep in years, pinched the bridge of his nose. Carter, I don't know whether to congratulate you or throw you in the brig. Jack grinned. Why not both? You know, for efficiency. Briggs exhaled sharply. Just get to the debriefing room. Now. Jack nodded, sauntering past the stunned crew. Behind him, Briggs muttered to his adjutant, I swear, that man's going to be the death of me. The adjutant hesitated. Well, sir, considering the entire Galactic Council is losing their minds over him right now, he might be the death of all of us. Briggs groaned. Fantastic. Galactic Council HQ, a diplomatic nightmare. Meanwhile, in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council Central Station, chaos reigned. Ambassadors from dozens of species crowded into a circular chamber, all speaking over each other. Holograms displayed news feeds, each flashing the same ridiculous headline. Human Navy SEAL escapes Council custody. Single-handedly outruns enforcement ship. Causes pirate incident. At the center of the room, Commander Zalvor stood stiffly, arms folded behind his back, enduring the full force of his superior's outrage. A bloated, amphibious diplomat from the Zarin Republic gurgled angrily. You had him in custody, and you let him go. Zalvor's mandibles twitched. It was the logical decision at the time. An avian representative from the Detainee Accord flared her wings. Logical? Logical? You release a human soldier, a highly trained operative, who immediately humiliated our fleet and led pirates straight to us. Zalvor resisted the urge to sigh. The pirates were an unfortunate variable. A reptilian official from the Vorkai Dominion hissed. You mean to say this one human outmaneuvered an entire Galactic Council enforcement vessel? Silence fell. Zalvor hesitated before replying. Yes, another silence. The room collectively processed the implication. A furry delegate from the Uarshan collective muttered, They're getting worse. The amphibian diplomat's gills flared. Worse, they were already a nightmare when they started putting guns on their flying metal boxes. Now they're unpredictable. The avian representative folded her wings tightly. I move that we officially classify humanity as a galactic-level threat. A few gasps. Some murmurs of agreement. Zalvor clenched his jaw. That would be a catastrophic mistake. The avian narrowed her eyes. Oh, and why is that? Zalvor straightened, his tone firm. Because we kidnapped a human Special Forces operative, interrogated him, then attempted to recapture him after we already released him, and he still got away. If we label their entire species a threat, what do you think their response will be? No one had an answer. Zalvor let the silence linger. Finally, the Vorkai delegate spoke. So what do you suggest? Zalvor exhaled slowly. We do nothing. More murmurs. Disbelief. Zalvor's mandibles twitched. We pretend this never happened, because if we escalate, they will escalate. And I, for one, do not want to see what happens when humanity starts taking us personally. After a long pause, the room nodded in grim agreement. Back on the USS Valiant, Jack sat across from Commander Briggs in the debriefing room, feet kicked up on the table. Briggs had barely touched his coffee, staring at the after-action report like it might catch fire. "So let me get this straight," he said, rubbing his temples. "You were captured by the Galactic Council, convinced them to let you go, got into a high-speed chase, caused an interstellar diplomatic incident, and now they're pretending it never happened?" Jack shrugged. "That about sums it up." Briggs sighed. "Carter, do you even realize what kind of political tightrope we're walking now?" Jack grinned. "Oh, absolutely. That's why it's hilarious." Briggs scowled. "This isn't funny." Jack leaned forward. "Come on, Commander. The Galactic Council, the self-proclaimed rulers of interstellar diplomacy, are too embarrassed to admit one human outplayed them. You don't think that's even a little funny?" Briggs sighed. "Okay, maybe a little." Jack smirked. "And hey, look on the bright side. No war." Briggs shook his head. "No war yet." Jack stretched. "Well, if that ever changes, they definitely don't want to start with me." Briggs muttered. "That's what I'm afraid of." Final scene, Zalvor's reflection. On the bridge of his ship, Zalvor sat alone, staring out into the void. His officers had long since gone to rest, but he remained lost in thought. Jack Carter was a single soldier, one man, and yet he had outmaneuvered an entire government. Zalvor had seen many warriors in his time, but Carter was something else. Not just skilled, not just dangerous. He was human, and that, Zalvor realized, made all the difference. As he gazed into the stars, he made a silent vow. Never again